All right, good morning everyone on Facebook, on the phone line. I'm going over some tips for taking the exams. Currently, the ASMC offers you can do the exam either going into an education center or you can do it virtually where you do the exam at home. If you can avoid doing it at home, I would advise you to avoid it, even though it seems more accessible to you. But in the event that you have internet problems, computer problems, all of that, then it can hinder you from taking the exam at that point. Or the best example I can give you is one participant was taking the exam and their internet connectivity went down and they had to stop the exam at that point, and they failed the exam, and then they had to go back to ASMC to explain, hey, my internet went down. They eventually got the credit to go take the exam again. But to take away the frustration and knowing that the exams themselves cause stress, I would not advise you to take it at home. Okay, any question on test taking techniques, or any questions that you may have before we dive into the information on the phone line, or if you have any question on Facebook, you can leave comments. I also, let me put the phone number here so you can call in on the teleconference number if you want to ask questions. And let me press send. All right, if no questions, we'll go ahead. And so this week, the purpose of the session this week now is to go over the final portions of CDFM Module 1. Remember that all the modules include fiscal law, and in effect, fiscal law accounts for the majority of the questions on Module 1, 2, and 3. So even though we touched bits and pieces of the fiscal law last couple of weeks, I want to go into Module 3, Competency 1 again to kind of go over some of the specific fiscal law things. Just because the information is not in Module 1 does not mean that the questions may not be on your exam for Module 1. Does everyone understand that? Any questions on that? I need to make sure I clarify that with you. And you have to give me feedback, because this is a study group, not me just... I am no resident expert. I may be a test-taking expert at some point, but I've gone through the material enough where I can help you navigate. But you got to give me feedback so I can make sure that you're understanding where I'm coming from. So if you're on Facebook alone, you're going to have... Okay, hold on one second for me. If you're on Facebook alone, you can... I just posted the teleconference number and pin that you can call in if you want to ask questions. All right, I have a question on the phone line. Go ahead, please.
Yep. Earlier, as you started to kick it off, you mentioned, test-taking techniques based on either your experience or feedback from your students.
Yes, ma'am.
And one of the things you keep repeating is as you are going through the material, continue to reiterate acronyms and who they work for, and
correct,
so on and so forth. Other than that we've talked about quite a bit, are there any other key takeaways that you've garnered over the years, or based on the feedback you've received, ma'am?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat your question to make sure I understand it and make sure that those on Facebook can hear the question. So the question is basically asking for CDFM test taking. Oh, you gave me a new video. Let me write that down. Test taking techniques. So other than whenever you move from one spot to the next in the study guide, you recap what you already know on the information. The other thing when you're taking the exam is read the questions. And it's just part of test taking technique that we typically will just, if especially multiple choice, if we start reading the question and we see, oh, I know that answer, we pick the answer. But many times when we write exam questions, the way it's written, it says which one is not a part of this process. And so part of it is reading the information in front of you. Like I said, when I take a test, I use my index finger and I point at the words and to force myself to read every word on it. Also, when you're studying, I will take a blank sheet of paper, put the topic of whatever the topic is. Let's say the topic is congressional action or how a bill becomes a law. And just sit there and jot down, again, study technique, jot down everything that you know about that topic. And that's why I start off with history, with the Constitution, with the 3 branch of government, because as you're telling the story, you can build on that 3 branches of government. And then where do you go? Who works for Congress? Okay, GAO, Congressional Budget Office, who else is up there? And then you have the executive branch. Who works in the executive branch? You got the president, you have OMB, and you have the Treasury that gets involved there. So those are different techniques that we use. Is study it as you're building a process map. That is the best way I can tell you. Where if you take the book away, then you can still recap that information. You can close your eyes and recap the information because you've learned it in a systematic process instead of just bits and pieces of information here and there. Does that help? For the person that asked the question? Okay. So that's about it. Other than knowing the information, knowing the key players involved, again, knowing the hierarchy, who works for whom. You have to know that structure, that hierarchy, and I think I have a video out there on the RM environment. Make sure you know that and what documents they produce at each stage, why, who, when, and so forth. So as we're starting today, we're just, like I said, I was just going to add some more of the fiscal law information into today's session. And let me scroll up so I can see if they have comments on here. And you can ask questions. Anything that I discuss, if you don't understand it, please pause me and we can discuss it at that point. All right, so my question to you, Article 1 of the Constitution governs which branch of government? Legislative branch. That's correct. So anytime you see Article 1, automatically your brain was, if you keep repeating and repeating it, then your brain will switch. Article 1, Congress. Article 1, Congress, legislative branch, executive, Article 2, and so forth. And so part of the process of the Budget and Accounting Act of 1921, it requires the president to submit an annual budget to Congress. When is the president required to submit the budget?
Second Monday in February.
All right, so no later. And on the exam, again, as I'm thinking of test taking, it's not which answer is, it's not that all the answers are wrong. Many times it'll say which is the best answer. So that can also trip you because it doesn't mean that one answer is wrong. It means that one is better than the other. So like you said, the second Monday in February. Well, really it says no later than the second Monday in February. What that also tells me is it can be before, right? It can be before that Monday in February, no later than the first Monday in February. I think I say second. No later than the first Monday in February. So it also means that it can be prior to that date. All right, so we know that every appropriation has a specific purpose, time, and amount, PTA. What is the U.S. code that governs purpose, time, and amount? Let's start with purpose. 31 U.S. code, because we like to say, okay, they've committed an ADA violation. But if I say they've violated purpose, which U.S. code governs that?
41.
31 U.S. Code 1301. What about time? $15.02, you said? That is correct. 31 U.S. Code 1502. What about amount? That is correct. 1341, 1342, and 1517. All right, so now we need to figure out, since we have 3 for amount, 1341 is violating what? Right, because you told me there was 3 U.S. code. Go ahead.
Appropriation.
So we're violating the appropriation, meaning I can't spend before I get the appropriation. I can't spend more than what I receive in the appropriation. What about 1342? U.S. Code 1342. What am I violating there? $1342 is the one. Voluntary services. I'm dealing with volunteers, where it talks about if we have a paid position, a GS position, I cannot accept someone to say, hey, you don't have to pay me. I just want to come in and can you show me what y'all do so I can gain some experience? If that position is a paid position, no, we cannot accept voluntary services. So only if the position can be lowered to 0, it's discretionary, or if it's already a statutory, like the Red Cross, it's already a statutory organization, they already have the right to accept voluntary services. So all I'm doing is flipping pages, and as I see a topic, pops out to me. All right, as we talk about time, we talk about severable service versus unseverable. What is the difference?
Severable service, you can stop it like janitorial service at any time. Unseverable, the other is basically like a building. You can't have a part of a building. You have to have the whole thing.
Perfect example. Severable service is a service that no matter at what point, if I want to cancel that service, I still receive the benefit of the service. A janitorial service, cleaning service. A non-severable, I don't want half of a building, I want the whole building. So that is a non-severable. That means if I enter into that contract, I have to pay the full amount to pay for that contract. Now when it comes to obligating funds, sometimes with severable service, you may have a contract that's 13 months, 14 months, 15 months. If I'm starting a contract at 1 September and it's a 13-month contract, how much or what amount can I obligate of that 13-month contract?
12 months.
So I can only obligate so if I enter into a contract 1 September, it doesn't matter if it crosses fiscal year, if it's a severable service. But if that contract is a 13-month contract, I am limited to only obligating current funds up to 12 months. And the additional once I receive that new appropriation. All right. What are the 2 permissible actions? So I'll give you one. We typically say subject to availability of funds. So if we don't have the new appropriation at the beginning of the fiscal year, we cannot pay for that 13th month, that other month. So what is the other permissible action on a contract? Let's say September. Can I enter, let's say we're in fiscal year 22, it's 1 September. Can I enter into a fiscal year 23 contract? And if so, how? So many parts. Fiscal year 22, today is 1 September. Can I enter into a fiscal year 23 contract? And if so, how?
When you're making, what comes to mind to me is when you have a contract going through, passing through fiscal years. You've already got it approved, say, for that September. It's going to go through 23, part of that with that 12-month contract.
Okay, so that's one way, right? So we already have an existing contract, and it's already been obligated. Like we talked about the 13-month contract. You can obligate up to 12 months. But what if it's a new contract and the period of performance starts 5 October? Can I, if the period of performance doesn't start till 5 October, can I obligate FY23, the next fiscal year funds at that point? And if so, how? Let's try that other question. Any thoughts? The answer to that question is...
Going back to...
Go ahead.
Ma'am.
The answer to that question is yes. Only if Congress has already appropriated the before 1 October. So for those who've only been around the government for a few years, you might only be around long enough to see that we only operate on the CRs. But there are some years that the government does appropriate funds prior to the fiscal year starting. So let's say they had already approved FY23 funds. If it's September, yes, I can enter into FY23 contracts. So there's two different. It's either subject to availability of funds, or if I have an approved appropriation for that fiscal year, then I can go ahead and enter into that contract. All right, let's talk about appropriation life cycle. What are the two annual appropriations?
O&M.
O&M, and there's two of them.
First.
MILPERS, right? Military personnel. O&M and MILPERS are the annual expense type appropriation. What type of appropriation, or what's the life cycle for RDT&E? How long are they current?
Years.
2 years. What about procurement? 3. And what's that on? Shipbuilding, conversion, Navy, and military construction.
5 years.
5 years. Every appropriation stays in the expired state, which is phase 2, for how long?
Years.
All right, so every appropriation stays in the expired state for 5 years. What can we do with appropriations when they are in the expired state? One question leads to the other. Go ahead.
Okay, whatever, if an invoice comes in later on, you can make any payments, any adjustments, like that. Okay,
so the answer is yes, we can make adjustments, either upward or downward. We need to add additional funds. We need to reduce funds. They're returning funds. So the only thing we can do, so even though appropriations expired in the public's eyes, we are done with that appropriation, but for us, we still have to deal with those appropriations for an additional 5 years to make upward or downward adjustments. And then after that 5th year, what happens to that appropriation?
It gets returned to the Treasury.
It gets returned to the miscellaneous receipts in the Treasury after that 5th year. So it is closed. It is canceled. What if I receive an invoice on a canceled account? Can I pay that invoice? And if so, what are my limitations?
You can. You have to use something that you have current funds that are similar to the ones that's being asked for, and you can only use it for like on the dollar. I can't remember it, like 10%. It's like pennies to the dollar. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, a little lower though, but you're on the right track. So the answer is, if you receive an invoice from a closed account, you are limited to using 1% of your current appropriation. With the same type of appropriation you would have used then, you can use your current appropriation, but you're limited to using 1%, because once those appropriations are canceled, they go back to the Treasury into that miscellaneous receipt, and we have no other control over those funds. All right, so by knowing the current period, the expired period, and the closed period, now here's a scenario. You have procurement funds. And how many years we say procurement funds are good for?
3 years.
3 years, right? Okay. So today, let's see, what's today's date? Today is March the 2nd, 2022. I have received procurement funds. So I'm in fiscal year 22. I received procurement funds. When will these funds be closed? And I give you some time to work it out. So, scenario I'm giving you, you have procurement funds. You receive them in FY22. When will these funds be closed or canceled? Anyone? All right.
28.
I hear, okay, I got one answer says 28. What other answers I got? Let's see, we're going to see who gets closest.
2030.
FY what? 2030? Okay, I'm liking that one. All right, let me give, who's a tiebreaker?
2030. FY 27.
FY 27, you say? So we need a tiebreaker. We need a tiebreaker. I'm hearing 3 different answers. Well, who's a tiebreaker? Who's got a different answer?
2030.
2030. All right, I'm liking 2030. Let me show you how. All right, so I just told you have procurement funds. So procurement funds, we said, are good, are current for 3 years. So FY 22, FY 23, FY 24. So those are your 3 years. Then we also say every appropriation is expired for an additional 5 years. So that's FY 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, which makes this procurement funds close in FY 30, 2030. Y'all see how I did that? You want to try another one?
Yes, ma'am.
Because this is how you will see it in the exam. If you see this, it's not going to be, okay, well, what happens in the current state and the expired state? They're going to tell you what appropriation you have, because there's no other way to present it in the exam. So let's say, okay, you have Milcon funds. And I'm going to mess you up now. I'm going to say today is 5 November 2005. When will these funds be expired? What is the 5-year period that these will be expired? Milcon funds, today is 5 November 2005. When will these appropriations be in the expired state? What's that 5-year fiscal year period they'll be in the expired state? All right, we'll pause for a few minutes, give you a chance to say again.
15.
Okay, so I have 1 for 15. All right, what else we got?
They enter the expired state in FY10, but they.
Okay, tell me the 5 fiscal years. Maybe that's the way that Okay, let me hear the first person that said 15. Give me the 5-year expired state up to 15. Let me do it that way. Because we said they expire for 5 years. So what are the 5-year period?
Okay, so the expired period would be FY 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And then they would be closed out in 15.
Okay, I'm a pencil that one. All right, next. All right, hold that thought. All right, who got another different answer? All right, we have military construction funds. Today is 5 November 05. When will these funds be expired? So I want the 5 fiscal year period they will be expired. All right, let me take one other person and let's walk it through together. Again, there's no name, so you can, even if your answer is wrong, we're not going to chastise you for it being wrong. This is the time frame for you to get it right and make sure you understand. So let me hear one other person, and then we'll go ahead with this one. All right, so Milcon, go ahead. No takers? All right, let me check. No notes, no comments. What? Nobody want to take it? All right. All right, let's walk it through together. All right, so we have military construction funds. We say it's 5 November 05. So what fiscal year am I in at 5 November 05? Hello?
06.
I'm in fiscal year 06. That's correct. So the 5-year period that Milcon funds are current is fiscal year 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then it expires 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then it's closed 16. Any question on how I got that? Because you have to first know what fiscal year you're in. And everything is operating off of a fiscal year, the entire fiscal year. So if it's military construction funds, they are good for 5 years. So if today is 5 November 05, we are in fiscal year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's the 5-year period that is good. Expired for an additional 5, which is 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Closed, canceled, FY16. All right, so make sure you understand what I was doing there, because if you see that information again, that is how you're most likely going to see it. All right, so we talked about that. All right, who appropriates funds? Congress. All right, so let's go with I'm going to walk through the budget process again. We say that the president must submit the budget to Congress no later than the first Monday in February. So once the president, actually, let's back it up. So DOD and the agencies, they do the fall review with OMB, and OMB makes a decision on what budget estimate submission they're going to send forward. What is it called when OMB makes that final decision on what they're going to send forward? The OMB what? Starts with a P. Pass back, correct. OMB pass back. So whenever OMB and DOD and the other agencies sit down and they go over the numbers and OMB makes that final decision, pass back. And so once that budget, the president submits the budget to Congress. What is the process that Congress goes through to review that budget? What are the 3 phases? So you have congressional action, authorization process, appropriation process. Right? Y'all remember that? Keep talking to me. I need feedback.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So once the president gives them the budget, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, are you asking about the big topics under the budget process, or are you asking about the processes under congressional action?
Well, right. Congressional action. Yes. So what happened? I'm asking what happens once the president gives them the budget to Congress. What does Congress do? So you have to know that they go through this congressional action. Go ahead, ma'am.
That's usually when we do the budget rollout and we do the posture hearings, and the House and the Senate committees review the total budget.
Right. So you go through the first phase, which is the budget resolution process. And that's when the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, provides the deficit numbers, if we had a surplus, the outlays and all that, like an accountant would do, provide all the data. And in the budget resolution process is when the Congress decides what limitation and guidelines they're going to use as they review the president's budget. Which House and which Senate then is responsible for the budget resolution process? So you say the House Budget Committee and the Senate Budget Committee, right? Because every House has the same representative on the Senate side. And then while that is happening, you also have the authorization process. What is the purpose of the authorization process?
It authorizes the programs.
Okay, so the authorization process authorizes the programs. And so once the House and the Senate, they decide on what guidelines they're going to use, they review it, they look at the programs, they might even say, hey, we agree 2 million, 5 million, but it doesn't matter. The only thing we want from them is the authorization and the approval for the programs. Which House and which Senate is responsible for the authorization process?
The House and the Senate Armed Service Committee.
So the Armed Services Committee, House and the Senate. And you got to also remember that the authorization and the appropriation process goes to the president for the president to sign for them to become law. Authorization law and the appropriation law. Which House and which Senate is responsible for the appropriation law? Or process, I should say. Process.
The hack and the sack.
Okay, so the House appropriators and the Senate appropriators are responsible for the appropriation process. All right, so now we get, again, building a process map. So now Congress has appropriated the funds. Two things happen. What is the legal thing that happens after Congress appropriates the funds? So the legal one that you can actually tie back to the Constitution. What process is that?
It becomes a law.
Right. So it becomes a law.
It becomes a law.
Right. So it becomes a law. And remember, Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution says, no money shall be drawn out of the Treasury unless we have an appropriation law in place. So the two things that happens after Congress appropriate, the legal step is the Treasury issuing the Treasury warrant or the appropriation warrant. And then the second thing that happens is OMB begins the apportionment process. How does that process go? How does it go? So appropriation have been approved, signed by the president. Now what does the agencies have to do? So the agencies,
Fill out a
go ahead.
132.
The SF-132. So even though OMB begins the apportionment process, the first step has to be taken by the agencies. The agencies must submit an SF-132 within 10 days of the appropriation being enacted. They submit that SF-132 apportionment document to OMB. Then OMB has how many days to send them their apportionment? How many days?
30 days.
OMB, correct. OMB has 30 days to send out the apportionment. That's correct. All right, so I'm going to switch some gears. Here we go. Now let's check. All right, so I'm flipping through like all the resources now. So that's what you hear me doing. All right. Where are all federal laws enacted? Let me switch it up for you. Where are all federal laws enacted? Which branch of government? Let me help you there.
Anyone there?
I'm here. What was your response? So laws are enacted in Congress. Can you hear me? Make sure y'all didn't cut out. What was the precursor to the Constitution? That is the Articles.
Articles of the Confederation.
That's correct. The Articles of Confederation. Which branch of government implements the laws? Which branch of government implements the laws?
The executive.
The executive, right? They didn't use the word execute the laws because most people know execute the laws. So we use the word implement. It's the same thing. Implement the laws is the executive branch. How frequently does Congress review the budget? Not a trick question, just straightforward.
Annually.
Annually, right? Every year. And everyone should know this because we just said it. Which agency issues apportionments?
OMB.
OMB, Office of Management and Budget. OMB works for whom? OMB works for the executive branch or the president. Which branch? Oh, okay, let me make sure I ask them. What is the term used as a subdivision of apportionment? It's a different way of asking another question that we've talked about. What is a subdivision of an apportionment called? So we say Congress appropriate, OMB does a subdivision of an appropriation, which is an apportionment. So what is a subdivision of an apportionment? It is an allotment. Yeah, right? So that's, like I said, don't get confused. Just kind of think it through. Because that's a different way of saying that after appropriate, apportion, allotment is the next step down, subdivision. So that is the term. So allotment is a subdivision of an apportionment. That is correct. So Just think about the words. What is the name of the budget office that works for Congress?
Congressional Budget Office.
There you go. Congressional Budget Office. What occurs when Congress is not in session and the president does not sign a bill within 10 days? What happens? Let me repeat. What happens when Congress is not in session and the president does not sign a bill?
It's vetoed.
What kind of veto is it?
Pocket veto.
Pocket veto, because that's the scenario, right? A veto is the president sending it back. But a pocket veto means the president receives it, he does nothing within 10 days, and Congress is not in session, so that becomes a pocket veto. Can the Congress override a presidential veto? And if so, with how much vote? Can the Congress override a presidential veto? And if so, by how much vote of Congress?
Yes.
Yes?
2/3.
2/3, right? So if 2/3 of Congress can agree, they can override a presidential veto. All right, let's see what else we got. What is the largest single source of federal revenue? The government's revenue. What is the single largest source of the government's revenue?
Taxes.
Individual income taxes. What is the second largest? Social Security and Medicare. That's the second largest revenue. What is the largest expense?
Mandatory bills.
Mandatory bills, right? What's the percentage? That's of what we spend.
60-ish.
Higher.
About 60-ish.
A little higher. Actually, it's higher now. It's 70% now. So 70% of the bills that the government pays are all mandatory bills. What is the term used as a postponement of an appropriated fund? When you postpone funds, what is the term? Deferral. What gives the federal agencies legal authority to operate a program? I like this one because it switches the question around. What gives a federal agency the legal authority to operate a program? And automatically when you hear the word program, you should already be clicking, like what are they, right? Play on words. Program. What authorizes us to operate programs? Come on, I hear you back there. If you're thinking it, say it, because you're probably right. What law authorizes us to operate programs? The authorization law. Right? Isn't that what we said it does? Authorization authorizes us to operate programs. president activate reserve forces? And the answer to that question is yes. How many? How many forces can he activate at a time? What's the limit? So he can act. Say again?
200,000?
Okay, so he can activate, that's correct, up to 200,000 reserve forces. What is the condition for him to be able to activate these reserve forces without having to go to Congress? Because remember, Congress is the one responsible for all of this. So what is the condition that allows the president to activate reserve forces?
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction, terrorists, or threat of a terrorist attack. Those are the conditions. And for how long can he activate these forces? No more than 365 days or no more than a year. What is the name of the DOD's internal control effort? And you probably participate in it, so you should know what that effort is. What is the DOD's internal control effort? Right? Listen to the words. There's a key word in there somewhere. So we're talking about what? Internal control, right? So what is the program called? Management or Managers Internal Control Program, MICP. What agencies issues standards for internal control in the federal government in the Green Book? Which agency publishes that? Standards for internal control in the federal government or the Green Book.
GAO.
GAO. What does GAO stand for?
Government Accountability Office.
Government Accountability Office. Who do they work for? See all these questions from that one?
Congress.
Congress. All right, so what do they do for Congress? So they are an independent auditing agency. They're independent from the executive branch. And they audit the executive branch. They audit the budget. So whoever gets the budget, the executive branch. So they all independent auditing agency that works directly for Congress. Now, an agency must report what type of weakness. When you're doing the Financial Managers Integrity Act, material solution, right? When you're doing your annual assurance report, you got to do the material solution, material weakness. And you also have to, in that report, annotate the way in which you corrected the problem, if you were able to correct it. But certain things are considered material weakness, means you have to report them to higher. How many different forms of statement of assurance do we have on that report? So remember, the statement of assurance is done annually. You have a report that must be submitted, and how many different forms of that statement did we go over? So we went over 3 of them, right? We say, what is it? Unmodified, modified, and statement of no assurance. So those were the 3. How many GAO standards do we have for internal control? That's correct. We have five GAO standards. Let's see. Control activity, control environment, risk management. What's the fourth one? I know monitoring. What do we have? What am I missing? All right, somebody gonna help me? Control environment. Right, so what are some of the things we can do in internal control as far as controlling activities that we can take? Right, separation of duties. You don't have the same person inputting as the same person certifying their own transaction. So those are some of the actions we take in internal control. All right, what else we got? What law identified the Joint Chiefs of Staff as the senior military advisors? Anybody know which law did that? That is the Goldwater-Nichols Act, Reorganization Act of 1986. All right, let's talk about operational chain of command. So let me not switch too far. Hold on. I think I'm going too deep there. All right, what questions do you have of me? I'm going to switch my questions. Hold on. All right, I'm going to pause for a little bit so you can ask me questions. We went over that. So I'm also looking at all my resources. Budget formulation, we talked about that. Execution. Manpower, Title 10, turnover rates. Y'all still on the line with me? All right, so what is the MEO? What is the MEO? And I'm switching around because, again, on the exam, they're going to switch around. They're not going to go in any particular order. So I'm going to be switching around. What is MEO? The most efficient organization. You've heard that term? So when you're doing a manpower study, the MEO is the government structure that it'll take to do that job versus a contractor taking that job. So you got to know the MEO. You also talked about performance work statement, the PWS, which is the document that is used to send out for illicit bids from contractors to do the job. We talked about gifts. Does Congress have to be notified if we do a manpower study? And if so, in what case? Does Congress have to be notified if we're doing a manpower study? A76 study. OMB Circular A76. The answer is yes. Let's see, streamline process. At what point does Congress have to be notified? How many DOD civilians must be involved? Think what? 46? If it's going to affect 46 employees, then Congress must be notified before the study and the second to last step. And you also have to notify the personnel that would be impacted by this study. All right, so I'm going back now. We did all the knowledge checks. I went over the notes page. Does everybody on the line or on Facebook, if you want to send me a note, did you get the notes that was done for Module 1? I think everyone should have it by now. I've kind of pushed it a few times. Or if you don't have it, let me know, please. So everybody has it. Okay. All right. I think I have covered everything in one form or the other. All right. So I think I'm going to wrap it up for today unless you have questions for me. I want to be cognizant of your time. All right. That's all I have for today. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. This concludes the review of CDFM Module 1. If you have any questions, even though we're not going to meet next week, we'll follow up. That opportunity for you to go ahead and schedule your exam for next week or later this week. So I'm open. If you still have questions on something you went over and you have questions on it, feel free to reach out to me. I'm still accessible to you to answer and clarify, and we can do a one-on-one to make sure that you understand before you actually go into the exam. If there are no additional questions, let me check the comments. No comments. Thank you all for stopping by. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. I'll see you guys again next time.